They murdered Big Bertha. That 8-pound bass cruised up to my dock every dawn for 3 straight years. I named her, fed her, watched her swell in size. Now she bobbed belly up with 200 other fish because my HOA queen thinks she owns my lake. The chemical reek singed my sinuses at daybreak. Harsh copper sulfate mingled with decaying scales. Sloan Whitaker had dumped $3,500 of industrial algicide into my once pristine water under cover of night, turning it the shade of antifreeze. I stood there clutching Bertha's slick, lifeless body, trembling with raw fury. Then something perfectly poetic hit me. Sloan's upscale subdivision draws its drinking water from the same underground spring that feeds my lake. Every faucet, every address, 847 houses. She didn't just kill my fish. She tainted her whole neighborhood. And she has no idea what's about to roll over her. Ever dealt with neighbors who think they can wreck your property because they don't like what you're doing? Tell me where you're watching from. And if you've got a nightmare HOA tale, drop it below because this one's about to go off the rails. My name's Caleb Morgan, and at 52, I never imagined I'd be at war with a woman who likely spends more on manicures than I bring in a week. But that's suburbia for you. I'm a retired electrician turned solar panel installer here in Pine Ridge, North Carolina. The kind of man who fixes things with his hands and figures folks should mind their own business. My 12-acre place with its spring-fed lake has been in my family since 1952, back when this whole stretch was tobacco fields and common sense. Each morning I walk the gravel path my granddad laid, boots crunching on stones polished smooth by decades of anglers. The dock boards feel warm and time-worn under my palms, still tacky with early dew, and that sweet honeysuckle note blends with the clean mineral scent of spring water, blue heron nest in the cypress, bass break surface at first light. For 70 years, this spot was pure peace. Then the builders arrived. 15 years ago, they bought up everything around me and raised Willow Creek Estates, 847 McMansions starting at 600 grand. They waved millions to buy me out, wanted my lake for their country club. I told them they could take their check and build a clubhouse in hell. Most new neighbors were fine. Regular folks who waved as they jogged by, maybe asked about the bite, but then Sloan Whitaker moved in. Picture this, 47 years old, drives a white Lexus that gets detailed more often than most people shower, and brings a leather portfolio to block parties. She talks like an attorney even ordering coffee, tosses around lines like property value optimization and aesthetic compliance standards. The kind of person who probably schedules her bathroom breaks. Sloan installed herself as HOA president within 6 months and immediately launched her enhancement campaigns, which is fancy code for making everyone miserable until they bend to her suburban regime. Her opening salvo came 3 months after she arrived. Certified mail, official letterhead, the whole theater. My unsightly fishing apparently disturbed her peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. $800,000 she paid for that lakefront view, and watching me catch dinner somehow threatened her investment. The legal threats ramped up fast. She claimed my dock violated aesthetic covenants meant to apply to all area properties. The woman actually had the gall to demand I tear down a structure that's been here since before she was born. I called my buddy Jonah Ramirez, a real estate attorney who's bailed me out more than once. He nearly spit coffee laughing. Caleb, property that predates HOA formation can't be shackled by retroactive covenants. She's waving around laws that don't exist. Knowledge nugget. If your property existed before an HOA was created, their rules generally can't be enforced on your land after the fact. Your deed date is your legal shield. When intimidation failed, Sloan filed a bogus complaint with the county about my illegal dock. Poor inspector drove out, looked at my 1987 permits, and apologized for wasting his time. You could almost see him rolling his eyes. That's when she showed her real self. Every morning I'd head down to fish, 6 a.m., when the bass are feeding, and suddenly Sloan needed emergency landscaping. Leaf blowers, chainsaws, industrial mowers, all screaming full blast along her property line. Diesel fumes would drift over my lake, mixing with honeysuckle and turning my calm morning into something that smelled like a highway job site. Her crew pulled more overtime in 2 months than most people see all year, all despite one guy trying to fish in his own backyard. But I kept fishing. Some principles are worth standing on, even against suburban despots with too much cash and too little sense. I had no clue Sloan was just getting warmed up, and I definitely didn't know she was wild enough to commit environmental terrorism to get her way. 2 weeks after the county inspector chuckled at Sloan's bogus dock complaint, she hired the priciest surveyor across 3 counties to recheck her property lines. Not because there was any question. My grandfather set those boundaries in concrete markers that will probably outlast civilization itself. This was pure harassment dressed up with a professional invoice. The survey crew rolled up Tuesday morning with gear worth more than my truck. Lights, GPS rigs, laser levels that probably cost more per hour than most people earn in a day. I watched from my kitchen window, sipping coffee and enjoying the show as they spent 6 hours measuring the same legal boundary that's been in place since Truman was president. The scent of freshly cut grass from their equipment mingled with the morning lake mist. Even her harassment had to be perfectly manicured. 3 days later, Sloan's attorney mailed me a registered letter claiming my dock extended exactly 6 inches into community water rights. 6 whole inches on a lake that's been in my family since before she was born. But here's where Sloan truly revealed her nature. She actually filed a lawsuit in county court for property encroachment. Official letterhead, court stamps, filing fees that probably exceeded most people's car payments, all over 6 inches of dock space. When this woman set out to ruin someone's life, she didn't hold back. While her legal papers crawled through the system, she launched a Facebook crusade that could rival a political campaign. She posted in the Willow Creek Estates group about her difficult neighbor refusing to respect community standards. The comment section devolved into a digital lynch mob faster than you could say property values. But 2 can play the research game. I spent my weekend buried in the dusty basement of the county courthouse, breathing air probably older than Sloan's entire career, combing through deed records and property transfers. Sometimes the best revenge is simply knowing more than your opponent. And holy hell, did I strike gold? My grandfather didn't just own the land. He owned exclusive water rights to the entire lake system. Every drop, every fish, every molecule of H2O. The original 1952 deed explicitly included all water rights, surface and subsurface, including natural springs and tributaries. But here's the part that made me laugh so hard I nearly toppled off my chair. The lake is spring-fed from an underground aquifer that extends directly beneath Sloan's precious subdivision. Legally speaking, every time her neighbors flush their toilets, they're using my water. Knowledge nugget. Water rights often transfer separately from land ownership and are recorded in property deeds. These rights can be worth more than the land itself. I called Jonah Ramirez with my discovery. After he finished laughing like a madman, he said, "Caleb, you don't just have a defense. You've got a nuclear weapon disguised as a property deed." So, we filed a countersuit for harassment, slander, and abuse of legal process. And the timing? Pure poetry. Sloan was hosting one of her fancy backyard soirees. 40-plus HOA residents with wine glasses, griping about property taxes while nibbling on food that cost more per bite than most people spend on lunch. The evening air carried the scent of catered salmon and pretentious conversation. Champagne glasses glowed in the golden hour light. Everyone dressed like they were auditioning for a luxury real estate ad. Right in the middle of Sloan's speech about community standards and property values, a sheriff's deputy strolled through her back gate like he owned the place. "Ma'am, I need to serve you with some legal documents." 40 conversations stopped mid-sentence. The only sound was ice clinking nervously in glasses as Sloan's perfectly manicured hands trembled, reading the papers. "This is harassment," she shrieked loud enough to rattle windows. "That redneck is trying to intimidate me with frivolous lawsuits." And just like that, the mask fell away. The polished real estate attorney turned into just another suburban tyrant, melting down because someone dared fight back. Her guests suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Amazing how quickly wealthy people scatter when someone starts screaming about rednecks at a catered party. But Sloan wasn't finished. The next morning, I found an anonymous note tucked under my windshield wiper. "Stop fishing or face the consequences." Apparently, public humiliation just made her more dangerous. Anonymous threats were one thing, but what Sloan did next was outright government weaponization. There's nothing quite like watching a real estate attorney turn federal agencies into her personal attack dogs. Within a week of my countersuit, I had more inspectors crawling over my property than a meth lab bust. Fish and Wildlife arrived first, clipboards in hand, claiming they needed to investigate potential disruption to migratory bird patterns caused by my fishing. I'm not kidding. This woman actually convinced a federal agency that me catching bass was somehow messing with duck GPS systems. The EPA inspector came next, suited up like he was walking into Chernobyl, armed with water testing kits and a clipboard thicker than Sloan's legal bills. Apparently, my private lake might be creating environmental hazards. The irony of that accusation would hit me like a freight train later. County Health Department, Thursday morning. Code enforcement, Friday afternoon. By week's end, I had more regulatory business cards than a Washington lobbyist. Each inspector found exactly what you'd expect from the cleanest lake in 3 counties. Absolutely nothing wrong. But bureaucratic harassment is a two-way street, and I was about to learn how to drive it. While Sloan was pulling puppet strings with government agencies, I was befriending the puppets. Turns out, when you're polite to overworked civil servants forced to chase obviously bogus complaints, they remember you. They also remember who's wasting their time. Dolores Ramirez became my secret weapon. 68 years old, retired county clerk with a memory like a steel trap and a grudge against crooked developers. Over coffee that tasted like justice and caffeine, she dropped a bombshell that made my head spin. Caleb, that whole subdivision was built on protected wetlands. The developer got permits by promising to preserve all natural water features forever. It's federal law. The coffee cup felt warm in my hands as the implications sank in. Knowledge nugget. Development permits often include perpetual preservation clauses that legally bind all future property owners. Violating these environmental restrictions can trigger massive federal penalties. I spent the next weekend playing environmental detective, and what I uncovered was better than winning the lottery. Sloan's landscaping contractor, the same diesel-belching crew that had been ruining my peaceful mornings, was using my lake as their personal garbage dump. Grass clippings, hedge trimmings, fertilizer-soaked debris, all of it flowing straight into federally protected wetlands. Every Saturday at dawn, like clockwork, I became an environmental paparazzo, hiding in the tree line with my camera, while the sweet honeysuckle scent mixed with choking diesel fumes. The rough bark of oak trees pressed into my back as I waited for the perfect shot. On the 3rd Saturday, I caught them in the act, dumping organic waste directly into my water, the splash echoing across the still morning air. The photos were damning, time-stamped, GPS-logged, high-resolution proof of federal crimes happening in broad daylight. But the real jackpot came when I ran their business license through the state database. Green Horizon Landscaping, LLC, was 40% owned by Richard Whitaker, Sloan's husband, a real estate developer and apparently part-time environmental criminal. The EPA doesn't just like environmental violations with photographic evidence. They practically worship them when they're tied to harassment campaigns. I filed my complaint Monday morning with a smile that could have powered half the county. By Wednesday, Green Horizon was under federal investigation. Richard lost 3 county contracts by Friday. Turns out, when you're dumping organic waste in protected wetlands, municipalities suddenly don't want you maintaining their public parks. Who could have guessed? The sound of Sloan's carefully controlled world starting to crack was sweeter than Sunday church bells. But if I thought environmental violations would humble her, I was about to learn how spectacularly wrong I was. Nothing makes a desperate woman more dangerous than watching her husband's business empire crumble because of her personal vendetta. And Sloan Whitaker was about to prove she'd rather scorch the earth than admit defeat. The morning I found the algae treatment company's business card tucked under my windshield wiper, I knew we'd crossed from legal warfare into something far darker. The card smelled faintly of chlorine and desperation. Environmental terrorism was apparently Sloan's next move. Too bad she didn't realize she was about to poison her own water supply. That business card wasn't just a threat. It was a confession waiting to happen. While I was out of town visiting Sandra's sister in Charlotte, Sloan had been busy researching algae management solutions, like she was planning for chemical warfare. She found Blue Stream Solutions, a commercial algicide company specializing in industrial-strength pond treatments, the kind of chemicals that can sterilize a lake faster than you can say property values. Here's where her legal mind really shined. She called Blue Stream and lied through her perfect veneers, claiming my lake was community property, suffering from a dangerous algae bloom that threatened public health. She paid $3,500 in cash up front for a midnight chemical assault on what she claimed was an emergency environmental situation. The irony would have been hilarious if it wasn't about to annihilate everything I loved. I came home Sunday evening, and the smell hit me before I even stepped out of my truck. That sharp, metallic stench of copper sulfate mixed with mass death. The lake water had turned a sickly blue-green, like antifreeze blended with apocalypse. Big Bertha floated 20 feet from the dock, her massive body already bloated in the poisoned water. 3 years of morning feedings, watching her grow from a decent-sized bass into a lake legend. And now she was just another casualty in Sloan's suburban genocide. 200 other fish floated beside her. Bluegill, crappie, catfish. An entire ecosystem assassinated overnight because one woman couldn't stand seeing someone enjoy their own property. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, the smooth plastic slick with sweat and fury. The county's environmental emergency hotline connected me to Officer Jim Halpern, who'd been investigating illegal dumping for 15 years. When I described the aquatic crime scene, his voice shifted from routine bureaucrat to DEFCON 1. Don't touch anything. Keep pets away. Don't disturb the evidence. I'm bringing the hazmat team. Halpern arrived with water analysis gear that looked like it belonged on Mars. The test strips changed into colors that don't exist in nature. Deep blues and purples, screaming massive chemical contamination. The acrid mix of testing chemicals and lake death burned my eyes. Industrial-strength copper sulfate poisoning, he said, voice tight with professional anger. Whoever did this didn't just kill your fish. They sterilized the entire ecosystem for at least 2 to 3 years. This is felony destruction of property, possibly federal environmental terrorism. Knowledge nugget. Illegal dumping of industrial chemicals on private property constitutes felony destruction in most states and can trigger federal environmental crime charges carrying 5 to 10-year prison sentences. But Halpern wasn't done playing detective. While I stood there holding a garbage bag that used to be my fishing paradise, he reviewed security footage from Mrs. Henson's doorbell camera across the street. The video was crystal clear. A Bluestream Solutions truck pulling up at 2:17 a.m. 2 figures in protective suits dumping poison straight into my lake, gone by 2:43 a.m. 26 minutes to wipe out 70 years of family heritage. That evening, I sat on my dock holding one of the smaller dead bass, remembering my grandfather teaching me to cast from that very spot. The wood beneath me felt cold and splintered, and the silence was deafening. No birds, no insects, no life where water once teemed with it. Sandra found me an hour later, and we both cried as we began the nightmare cleanup of environmental terrorism. But grief has a way of sharpening focus. As we filled bag after bag with Sloan's victims, my electrician's brain started connecting dots. I'd installed solar panels on dozens of homes in this subdivision. I knew their utility systems inside out. Every house in Willow Creek Estates uses well water pumped from the same underground spring system that feeds my lake. The same aquifer. The same water source. The same copper sulfate contamination now seeping through limestone channels toward 847 unsuspecting homes. I had my water tested the next morning by an independent lab. The results made my blood run cold. Copper sulfate levels 4 times higher than the EPA's safe drinking water standard. Sloan hadn't just poisoned my lake. She'd contaminated her entire neighborhood's water supply. Every faucet, every shower, every ice cube maker in that pristine subdivision was now serving up industrial toxins. The woman who spent months whining about my unsightly fishing had turned her perfect community into a toxic wasteland, and she was about to drink her own poison. Sweet, sweet karma never tasted so metallic. You know that moment when you're researching one thing and accidentally stumble on something far bigger? That's exactly what happened when I decided to dig deeper into my grandfather's property records. I thought I was simply building a stronger legal defense against Sloan's lawsuit. What I found instead was the equivalent of holding the only water well in a desert full of thirsty people. Monday morning, I headed back to the county courthouse basement, that special kind of bureaucratic purgatory that smells like old paper, dust, and crushed dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, as I dug through file boxes that hadn't been touched since people thought Y2K might end the world. The original 1952 deed transfer was buried under decades of irrelevant paperwork. My fingers were black with archival dust when I finally unearthed it, written in that dry legal language designed to make normal people fall asleep. Then I hit the paragraph that stopped my heart, including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereto in perpetuity. In perpetuity, Latin for forever and ever. My grandfather hadn't just purchased land. He'd bought every drop of water flowing through the underground spring system, stretching for miles beneath what would one day become Sloan's beloved subdivision. I sat there, hands trembling, holding a 70-year-old document that made me the most powerful person in 3 counties. The paper felt thin and fragile, but the words meant were stronger than steel. Here's where it got truly delicious. I pulled the Willow Creek Estates development records from 2008. The developer's water usage permit claimed they'd be drilling independent wells with sustainable water sources. Independent wells that tapped directly into my grandfather's spring system 400 feet downstream from my lake. Every single one of them. The developer had never purchased water rights because he probably didn't even know they existed as a separate legal asset. Most people don't. They assume owning land means owning whatever water sits beneath it. Wrong, expensive mistake, career-ending mistake. Knowledge nugget. Water rights are entirely separate from land ownership and must be explicitly transferred. Failure to secure them exposes developers and homeowners to massive legal liability and usage fees. For 15 years, 847 families had been using my water without permission, without compensation, and without even realizing that the neighbor they despised literally owned every drop flowing from their taps. The math made my head spin. Average household water usage times 847 homes times 15 years times market rate for water rights. We were talking tens of millions of dollars in back payments I could legally demand. But the contamination angle? That was the diamond on top of this legal gold mine. Every home in that subdivision was now drinking water poisoned by Sloan's midnight chemical attack. Copper sulfate exposure causes stomach pain, nausea, liver damage, and in children, developmental issues. The EPA treats this as a public health emergency warranting federal intervention. Sloan's lawsuit over 6 inches of dock space suddenly looked like a toddler threatening Mike Tyson. I called Jonah Ramirez from the parking lot, sunshine streaming through my truck's windshield as my world shifted beneath me. Jonah, I don't just own the lake, I own their entire water supply. Every drop they've used for 15 years is legally mine. Silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Caleb, he finally whispered, you're not dealing with a property dispute anymore. You're sitting on the biggest water rights case this state has ever seen. And if that contamination spreads through the aquifer... He didn't finish. We both knew Sloan had poisoned 847 homes using water that belonged to me. The power dynamic had just flipped so hard I could practically feel the earth move beneath Sloan's designer heels. When you realize you're holding a legal nuclear weapon, you don't swing it around recklessly. You assemble a team of experts who know exactly how to deploy it. My first call was to Rebecca Torres, an environmental attorney from Raleigh who'd built her career destroying corporations that thought poisoning communities was good business. Her office smelled like expensive espresso and vendetta when I walked in Tuesday morning. Water rights violation, environmental contamination, public health emergency, she said, eyes gleaming as she scanned my documents. Caleb, this isn't just a lawsuit. This is a masterclass in legal warfare that law schools will study for decades. Rebecca's strategy was brilliant. Hit them from every direction before they even realized they were under attack. Federal lawsuit for water rights theft. EPA emergency intervention for contamination. State criminal charges for illegal dumping. Civil suits for property damage, emotional distress, and punitive damages that would make a lottery winner blush. Legal tactic. Overwhelming opponents with simultaneous legal actions from multiple jurisdictions forces them into immediate defensive positions. They'd be too busy putting out fires to launch any coordinated counterattack. Next, I recruited Dr. James Holloway, a hydrogeologist from North Carolina State, known for making opposing lawyers crumble during depositions. We met at my poisoned lake Wednesday morning, where he spent 4 hours taking samples and mapping the underground spring system with equipment worth more than my truck. Fascinating aquifer structure, he said, kneeling in contaminated water that still reeked of chemicals. His hands moved with precision through the testing process, while dragonflies that once swarmed the shoreline were nowhere to be seen. Single-source spring feeding directly into residential wells. Contamination will reach every home within 6 to 8 weeks. We're looking at 800 to 1,000 affected properties. It was the scientific hammer that would crush any doubt about Sloan's guilt. Third on the team was Sarah Lang, an investigative journalist who'd spent 3 years dismantling corrupt HOAs like she was collecting trophies. Her exposés had taken down 2 HOA presidents for embezzlement and one who was literally running a protection racket. When she saw my evidence, her eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "This is Pulitzer-level material," she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table with reverent excitement. Power-drunk HOA tyrant poisons entire neighborhood while terrorizing the guy who legally owns their water supply. CNN and MSNBC will fight for the first interview. Sarah's background check on Sloan read like a sociopath's resume. 3 previous neighborhoods, 4 harassment lawsuits, 2 restraining orders for stalking. She'd spent 20 years destroying anyone who dared challenge her authority. Dolores Ramirez provided the historical ammo. Over diner coffee that tasted like justice and endless refills, she showed me permit applications proving the original developer had committed outright fraud, claiming water rights he never purchased, never owned, never even verified existed. Every homeowner bought property under false pretenses, Dolores explained, her weathered fingers tapping yellowed documents. They think they own water access. Legally, they've been stealing from you for 15 years. Rebecca ran the numbers with calculator precision. Market rate for water rights in our county, $50 per household per month, times 847 homes, times 180 months. $30.6 million in back payments I could demand. And that's before adding punitive damages for contamination. Financial strategy. In water rights cases, calculating both direct usage fees and consequential damages from environmental contamination often forces settlements before the other side can even mount a defense. But here's where I made a choice that separated justice from revenge. I wasn't going to financially destroy 800 innocent families just to punish one deranged woman. "We offer a settlement," Rebecca proposed. "Waive all back payments in exchange for 3 things: complete lake restoration, Sloan's resignation, and criminal prosecution, plus permanent oversight to prevent future abuse." Dr. Holloway drafted the restoration plan right there. 18 months of natural bioremediation, native fish restocking, and aquatic plant recovery. Estimated cost, $250,000, paid jointly by HOA funds and Sloan personally. Sarah coordinated media timing, simultaneous story release with legal filings for maximum public pressure. She'd already pitched NPR, the Washington Post environmental desk, and 3 cable networks salivating over the headline, "HOA President Poisons Entire Neighborhood Water Supply." The plan was elegant. Hit Sloan with federal charges, state charges, civil liability, and national media exposure all at once. Give innocent homeowners a path forward without bankrupting them. Force accountability without collective punishment. We had evidence that could convict. We had expert testimony that couldn't be challenged. We had media ready to turn Sloan into a national symbol of HOA tyranny. And we had moral high ground that would shine in both court and public opinion. Now, all we needed was the perfect stage for Sloan's spectacular downfall. The beauty of watching someone's empire collapse is the moment they realize their cover-up is only making things worse. But they're already too deep to stop digging. Sloan discovered the water contamination exactly the way karma intended, through her neighbors' complaints about the metallic taste in their morning coffee. Within a week of poisoning my lake, the Willow Creek Estates Facebook group erupted with posts about foul-tasting water and strange smells coming from the taps. Parents reported their kids suffering stomach aches. One woman said her dog refused to drink from its bowl. The comment section turned into a digital panic room. Sloan, being Sloan, immediately shifted into politician-style damage control, She posted an official HOA statement, claiming the taste was due to natural mineral deposits and seasonal groundwater changes. Translation: nothing to see here. Stop asking questions. Trust your suburban overlord. But desperate people do desperate things, and Sloan was about to show just how far she'd go to bury her environmental crime. She contacted Blue Stream Solutions and tried to bribe the owner into destroying their service records, offering $10,000 in cash to make any documentation of their midnight treatment disappear. The stench of her desperation could have cleared a room. What Sloan didn't realize was that environmental services companies keep meticulous records precisely because of legal liability. And the owner, a guy named Derek Thompson, recorded the entire conversation because something about a frantic woman offering cash bribes at 11 p.m. triggered his lawyer senses. Legal warning: attempting to destroy evidence or bribe witnesses elevates misdemeanor charges to felony obstruction of justice. The cover-up is often worse than the original crime. While Sloan scrambled to erase evidence, she also hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me, a guy named Rick Chambers, who looked like he learned his craft from bad TV dramas. Rick followed me around town, photographing my truck, talking to clients, trying to find anything that could discredit me in court. He even attempted to break into my truck one afternoon at the hardware store. I watched from inside as he tried the door handles, his cheap suit stretching at the seams. I called the police and had him arrested for attempted vehicle burglary. Turns out Rick had a history of pushing legal boundaries for his clients. His PI license was already on probation. But Sloan wasn't done yet. She filed anonymous complaints with the state contractor licensing board, claiming my solar business was operating without proper permits. Pure fabrication. But it triggered an investigation that cost me 2 weeks and $3,000 in legal fees to resolve. The bureaucratic harassment was back with a vengeance. This time, however, I documented everything. Every call, every complaint, every time she sicked government agencies on me. Surveillance tip: in harassment cases, always check your state's recording laws. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record every conversation without notifying the other party. Meanwhile, the community health crisis worsened. A local pediatrician noticed a spike in childhood stomach issues among kids from Willow Creek Estates. Parents brought children in with symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning: nausea, stomach pain, headaches. The HOA board received dozens of complaints about water quality. Residents were hoarding bottled water. Some families installed expensive filtration systems. The Facebook group turned into a support forum for people convinced something was very wrong. Sloan's response? Blame aging infrastructure and announce a $500 per household special assessment for emergency water system upgrades. She was literally charging people to fix the problem she had created. The board meeting where she announced this was spectacular. 80 furious homeowners packed into the community center, the air thick with tension and the smell of burnt coffee from the ancient drip machine. Parents stood up demanding answers, waiving medical bills, threatening lawsuits. Sloan stood at the podium in her designer suit, makeup flawless, voice steady, lying through her teeth about mineral deposits and infrastructure failures. The woman could have taught a masterclass in gaslighting. 3 board members confronted her afterward, demanding answers about a mysterious $3,500 landscaping expense from the HOA budget the previous month. Sloan refused to provide receipts, claimed it was routine maintenance, and threatened to sue any board member who questioned her financial decisions. That's when Patricia Monroe, a board member unrelated to Sarah, began investigating HOA finances. Turns out using community funds to poison a neighbor's property counts as embezzlement under North Carolina law. The walls were closing in on Sloan from every side. Her cover-up was creating new crimes faster than she could bury the old ones. And she still didn't know the worst part. She had poisoned a water supply that legally belonged to the man she'd been trying to destroy. That week, I received one final threatening phone call. Drop the lawsuit or you'll regret it. The voice was disguised, but the desperation underneath was unmistakable. My answer was simple. I'll see you in court. When a cornered animal realizes the trap is closing, it either surrenders or goes feral. Sloan chose feral. Her final gambit was a neighborhood-wide defamation campaign that would make a propaganda minister proud. She created 3 fake Facebook accounts with stock photos and fake histories, and flooded the Willow Creek Estates group with posts about my supposed illegal activities. According to her digital puppets, I was an environmental terrorist who poisoned my own lake to frame the HOA and extort money. They claimed my solar business was a front for illegal operations, that I had a criminal history, pure fiction, but posted with enough confidence that people started believing it. Defamation law, creating fake accounts to spread false statements that cause reputational or financial harm, constitutes aggravated defamation and can trigger separate civil and criminal charges. The smear campaign worked on some. I started getting hostile stares at the grocery store. 2 solar clients canceled contracts, citing concerns about my business. Someone spray-painted L on my truck in the Walmart parking lot. The acrid paint smell lingered for days even after I scrubbed it off. But Sloane's desperation soon crossed into truly stupid territory. She showed up at my house on a Thursday evening, dressed down instead of her usual power suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. The sunset cast long shadows across my driveway as she walked up, heels clicking on the concrete. "Caleb, I think we can resolve this like reasonable adults," she said, setting the briefcase on my porch railing. The leather creaked as she opened it, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills. $100,000 in cash to drop all legal action and sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement. The evening air smelled like honeysuckle and bribery. What Sloane didn't know was that I was wearing a wire. Jonah had suggested it after her PI got arrested, and I'd grown very comfortable with the little recorder taped to my chest. North Carolina's one-party consent law is a beautiful thing. "You're offering me money to cover up the fact that you poisoned my lake and contaminated your neighborhood's water supply?" I asked, making sure the wire caught every word crystal clear. "I'm offering you a reasonable settlement to resolve a property dispute," she said, lawyer speak dripping like venom. "This is a good faith gesture to avoid protracted litigation." "Good faith gesture?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling attempted bribery now?" Her face went from fake friendly to ice cold in seconds. She snapped the briefcase shut, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the quiet evening. "You're going to regret this, Caleb. I have connections in this county that will destroy you." "I'll take my chances," I said. "Now get off my property before I add trespassing to the list." She peeled out, her Lexus spitting gravel as she roared away. Meanwhile, the environmental health crisis was nearing a breaking point. The county health department had logged over 50 complaints about water quality. Parents documented their children's symptoms: nausea, stomach pain, persistent headaches, even skin rashes from bathing in contaminated water. A county health officer submitted an official concern report, prompting the EPA to investigate. When federal environmental agencies get involved, things escalate quickly. They don't take kindly to contaminated drinking water affecting hundreds of families. EPA investigators arrived at Willow Creek Estates on a Tuesday morning with water testing gear that made Dr. Holloway's setup look like a high school science project. They tested wells throughout the subdivision, mapped the aquifer system, and traced contamination sources with forensic precision. Their preliminary findings confirmed Holloway's prediction. Copper sulfate contamination was spreading through the entire underground spring system. Current levels in subdivision wells were nearing EPA emergency thresholds. Within another month, the water would be officially unsafe for human consumption. The EPA issued a public health advisory recommending residents avoid drinking tap water until further notice. Property values plummeted almost overnight. Nothing tanks real estate prices faster than federal warnings about toxic water. Sloane's mental state was unraveling in full view. Neighbors spotted her screaming at herself in a grocery store parking lot. Her husband, Richard, moved out, taking their kids and filing for separation, citing irreconcilable differences and potential legal liability. The HOA board finally voted to remove her as president after uncovering that she used community funds to pay for the algicide, the PI, and several other personal vendettas. Embezzlement charges were filed with the county prosecutor. Her lawyer quit, citing ethical concerns about representing someone committing crimes while under investigation. Everything Sloane had built, her status, her marriage, her power, collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. And she still didn't know the worst part. She had poisoned a water supply that legally belonged to the man she had tried to destroy. The final confrontation was inevitable, and it was going to be public. The Pine Ridge Community Center hadn't seen a crowd like this since the county tried raising property taxes. Standing room only, 300 people packed into a space meant for 200. The air was thick with body heat, nervous energy, and burnt institutional coffee. TV news crews set up cameras in the back. County deputies stood by the exits. EPA officials sat in the front row, badges gleaming, expressions grim. Sloan sat on stage with the remaining HOA board members, her designer suit flawless, makeup perfect, but her eyes had the panicked look of a cornered animal. She kept checking her phone, probably praying for a miracle. I sat in the third row with my team, Rebecca Torres, Dr. Holloway, Jonah Ramirez, Sarah Lang. We held documents that would change everything, but first we let Sloan dig her hole deeper. Patricia Monroe, now the new board president, called the meeting to order. We're here to address water quality concerns and discuss EPA findings. The room erupted. Parents shouted about sick children. Someone yelled about property values dropping $40,000 in 2 weeks. Demands flew for refunds, answers, accountability. Patricia raised her hands for quiet. The EPA will present their findings first. Dr. Sandra Bell from the EPA didn't sugarcoat it. She projected water testing results, bright red numbers showing copper sulfate levels 4 times above safe standards. Contamination originated from industrial algicide dumping here, she said, laser pointer highlighting my lake on the aquifer map. Chemicals entered the groundwater and spread throughout the spring, feeding your wells. Sloan squirmed like she was sitting on coals. Who dumped the chemicals? Someone shouted. Dr. Bell looked directly at Sloan. That's a matter for an ongoing criminal investigation. 300 heads swiveled toward Sloan. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Patricia cleared her throat. Caleb Morgan has information about property rights and water access. I walked to the microphone. Every eye followed. Cameras pivoted. Most of you know me as the difficult neighbor who wouldn't stop fishing, I began. Sloan Whitaker spent months trying to drive me off my property through lawsuits, harassment, and eventually environmental terrorism. That's slander, Sloan shouted, bolting upright. Sit down, Mrs. Whitaker, the sheriff's deputy ordered. Not requested, ordered. I held up my grandfather's 1952 deed. This document includes one specific paragraph. All water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereto in perpetuity. The room fell silent except for the hum of the projector. In plain English, I own the water right to the entire aquifer feeding this subdivision. Every drop from your taps for 15 years legally belongs to me. The developer never purchased those rights. He just drilled into my water without permission. Confused shouting filled the room. Anger, shock, fear. I raised my hand. I'm not here to bankrupt anyone. I'm waiving all back payments. About $30 million you won't owe me. But Sloan Whitaker poisoned my lake with industrial chemicals, destroying 70 years of family heritage and contaminating water that belongs to me. Then she covered it up while your children got sick. Rebecca rose. Mrs. Whitaker faces federal environmental destruction charges, state illegal dumping and embezzlement charges, and civil property damage charges. We have video evidence, recorded bribery attempts, and documentation of her using HOA funds for personal vendettas. The deputy walked toward the stage. Sloan went ghost white. This is a setup. He contaminated his own lake to frame me. Ma'am, I have an arrest warrant for environmental crimes and obstruction of justice. The room exploded as the deputy handcuffed her. You'll all regret this, she screamed. I'll sue every one of you. That redneck is manipulating you. The final mask was gone. Pure rage and classism on display before 300 witnesses and 3 news cameras. As she was escorted out, I returned to the microphone. I'm proposing a settlement that protects everyone. Full environmental restoration funded by insurance and Mrs. Whitaker's restitution, no back payments for water usage, and independent oversight to prevent future abuse. The crowd's fury shifted to cautious hope. Patricia spoke. The board unanimously supports this proposal. Dr. Holloway presented the restoration plan. 18 months to clean the water, restore the ecosystem, and conduct regular safety testing. Sarah Lang's expose was set to publish within the hour. HOA president poisons entire neighborhood water supply in personal vendetta. People filed out, some stopping to shake my hand, others silent as they processed everything. This was no longer about revenge. It was about accountability, healing, and ensuring no one else would suffer under petty tyrants. Sloan Whitaker spent months trying to destroy me. Instead, she destroyed herself and landed in a federal prison cell. 6 months after Sloan's arrest, I stood on my dock at sunrise watching native bass fingerlings released into the water. The lake was crystal clear again, the clean mineral scent replacing the chemical stench that once haunted this place. Dr. Holloway's restoration plan worked better than expected. Natural bioremediation, strategic water cycling, and native plant restoration brought the lake back to life faster than anyone imagined. Monthly EPA tests showed contamination levels had dropped to zero. Big Bertha's descendants were thriving. The grandfather's Lake Environmental Trust became something larger than I'd dreamed. Settlement funds, $250,000 from Sloan's assets and HOA insurance, created an environmental education program. Local schools bring kids out twice a month to learn about aquatic ecosystems, water conservation, and protecting natural resources. It turns out poisoning a lake can lead to something beautiful if you're willing to turn tragedy into education. Sloan's legal reckoning was exactly what she deserved. Federal environmental destruction charges, state illegal dumping, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. She pleaded guilty to all of it. 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, $75,000 in restitution, and 200 hours cleaning waterways after release. Her husband divorced her. Her real estate law license was permanently revoked. She lost everything trying to destroy one man who just wanted to fish in peace. Willow Creek Estates transformed too. The new HOA board implemented transparency policies requiring homeowner votes for all financial decisions. They formed resident rights committees and replaced Sloan's dictatorship with actual democracy. The twist no one saw coming. I opened my lake for community fishing. Every Saturday morning, families from the subdivision fish under proper environmental management. Kids who'd never held a rod learned to cast from the same dock where my grandfather taught me. The annual Spring Festival became a neighborhood tradition celebrating the restored ecosystem, community cooperation, and the idea that sometimes the best revenge is simply being better than your enemy. This year's festival drew 500 people, with proceeds funding local water conservation. Sandra and I still sit on that old dock most evenings, watching bass jump at sunset. The planks feel warm and worn beneath us, shaped by time and countless fishermen. Children's laughter from the fishing program mingles with bird song and the gentle splash of water. This place feels alive again. Our legal case set precedent. 3 other North Carolina water rights cases cited our settlement as a model for balancing individual property rights with community needs. Environmental law students study how we leverage power for restoration instead of destruction. HOA reform legislation passed the state Senate last month, inspired by Sloan's abuse. New laws require financial transparency, limit HOA authority over pre-existing properties, and establish penalties for harassment and abuse of power. One woman's tyranny led to systemic change, protecting thousands of future homeowners. My solar business expanded into environmental restoration projects because fighting and beating an HOA tyrant makes excellent marketing. I've since consulted with dozens of property owners facing similar harassment, helping them understand their rights and fight back effectively. Sarah Lang's article went national, sparked a podcast series, and inspired proposed federal legislation targeting HOA accountability. One lake, one stand against tyranny, nationwide impact. Here's what I learned. Never let petty tyrants make you abandon your principles. Document everything. Know your rights. Sometimes the best way to defeat your enemies isn't through destruction. It's by building something better from their mistakes. Your turn. Have you faced HOA nightmares or property rights battles? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else in the same fight. Real stories create real change. If this story inspired you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Next week, I'll share how a city councilman tried stealing a veteran's land through eminent domain abuse, until that veteran uncovered the councilman's own property violations. That karma was even sweeter. Remember, whether you're in North Carolina, Texas, California, or anywhere else dealing with power-hungry HOAs, you're not alone. Communities are stronger than tyrants. Truth is stronger than corruption. And sometimes, one person standing up for what's right changes everything. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and protect what's yours.